immigration judge, particularly if you've been here for a long time. And a lot of these people have been here over 10 years in the United States. And what I like to say is our economy and our laws are not in sync. So if you go up to Bakersfield or Fresno or somewhere in the Central Valley, which is the biggest agricultural hub, not only of California, but of the entire United States, you'll find that almost all the workers are undocumented. So if you had mass deportations and just rounded up all the agricultural workers, you can imagine what would happen to food prices, which were a major issue in this last election. But they would absolutely shoot up because you are not going to find a lot of Americans who are going to volunteer to go to the Central Valley and pick crops. Okay. Uh, the last time we had mass deportations in the US was under President Eisenhower in the early 50s. You can Google it. Not enough time for me to talk about it, but it's called Operation Wetback. And the Immigration Service came right into communities, mostly Hispanic communities, and rounded up people. Some were undocumented, some had green cards, some were citizens, but they were pushed over the border. Um, this time, if something like that happens, there will be litigation on day one, on January 20th, because there are rights under the law, and the law itself has barely been changed in the last 30 years. When President Trump had his first term, everything was accomplished by executive orders, not by changes in the law. When Biden became president, again, executive orders. So even though the Republicans have a very small advantage in Congress, I don't anticipate that any major immigration legislation is going to be passed, certainly not in the first few weeks or few months of the administration. So um, what I imagine will happen is a lot of members of the military will be charged with rounding up people who are illegal in the United States, and local police forces, particularly those in certain states like uh, Texas, Florida, they will also help. And people will be pushed into camps near the US Mexican border. The Immigration Service will put a very high bail amount that most of the people will not be able to afford. And so they'll have a choice, like either stay in these camps for years until you get a hearing before an immigration judge, because the immigration judges, there's only a few hundred of them, and there's about 1.5 million people waiting for their hearings. It can take many years to get a hearing. So either you stay in a camp and wait for your hearing, or we can deport you tomorrow and then you're out of the camp. And so I think that's probably going to be the strategy. Tom Holman, who was head of ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement under the first Trump administration, he has been appointed to, they call him the border czar. And he's made a bunch of interviews, which I've watched. And he said, we're going to go after violent criminals. And I think pretty much everybody would agree that if there's going to be any priorities, it should be violent criminals. When Obama was the president, he made violent criminals uh, the priority for deportation. Ironically, as soon as Trump took over, he took away that priority and everybody was just treated the same. But I think most people can agree that violent criminals should be deported, but we're talking about a few 100,000, not millions of people. Uh, how does the government find these other people? Well, probably programs where they have given their information to immigration and those programs can be ended. And I'll give a couple examples. There's a parole program from people from countries where they're subject to violence and so on, and they get US citizens to sponsor them, and they come for a couple years to the United States. I think a lot of those people could be deported. They could end that program. There's also another program called TPS, Temporary Protected Status, and several 100,000 people are on TPS from 16 different countries around the world: El Salvador, Venezuela, Haiti, Ukraine, and so on. It is possible that some of those TPS programs could be ended and those people could be deported from the US. And then one other thing, there's something called expedited removal. There are certain people that are not entitled to a hearing before a judge, but there are people that the program was set up to take people who have just crossed the border and put them back instead of, if they could wait years for a hearing, then even more people would cross the border. So you have to be here less than 2 years, and you have to be a certain distance from the border. So, those kind of things can be put into effect. What people are worried about is that they'll be overreached, that people will be subject to expedited removal who've been here more than 2 years, who are not near the border areas. So let me move on to some of the other subjects. I mean, in the first administration of President Trump, he promised to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. Um, the border with the US and Mexico is over 2,000 miles long. Uh, in the end, only about 450 miles of border fence was erected, and it was usually at places that already had a border wall because a lot of migrants would come in those areas, and the border wall would be sort of falling apart. So that was done. But as far as building a massive wall, that never happened, and I don't expect that that's going to happen, but we will see. Um, Also, there was a travel ban. Mostly, they called it the Muslim travel ban because all the countries that were selected were predominantly Muslim countries. Um, there was a travel ban, it got struck down by the courts. Trump had a second travel ban, that was struck down in the courts. And finally, his advisors crafted a third travel ban that was ultimately approved by the Supreme Court. So we might see another travel ban. We don't know exactly who it's going to apply to. Is it going to apply to people from Gaza or Syria? I mean, nobody knows at this point. Also, asylum. There are probably 1 million people in the US who have come from another country and applied for asylum in the US. Some of the claims are very legitimate, and those people could be killed if they're deported. Other claims are just because the backlog is so long that people know that if they apply for asylum, after a few months, they'll get a work card, and it'll be. I just had a gentleman from Iran a few months ago, and we applied for asylum for him 10 years ago, and he finally got his hearing. I went in with him to his hearing recently, recently in the spring, and we still don't have a decision. So the backlog is huge. Jeff Sessions, who was the first attorney general in the first Trump administration, he issued some decisions restricting asylum, which have been taken away. I expect that they will come back. One of them is that people who are victims of domestic violence cannot get asylum just because their spouse would beat them up or kill them or whatever, but that doesn't equate to asylum. Another one is gang violence. He said people that are subject to gang violence cannot get asylum. Interestingly enough, in the last year, the asylum denial rate has gone up over 30%. So even under the present administration, it's gotten more restrictive, and I expect, uh, starting January 20th, it will get even more restrictive. Um, Another interesting area is DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It was something that was put in place by executive order, not by law, by Obama in 2012. And when Obama put it in, he immediately got sued by a lot of states that said that it was illegal for him to do. Well, actually, when the Trump administration came in, uh, they tried to get rid of DACA, and it went through the courts, and they were never able to get rid of it. So now a lot of these people have not been able to file new applications for many years for DACA. So a lot of these DACA people who have been here sometimes since they were 3 or 4 years old, a lot of them are, college graduates now or company owners and stuff like that. Um, and a couple days ago, President to be Trump gave his first interview, which I watched. It's online. You can see it on YouTube for Meet the Press. And the interview, and thank you, Jenny, you recommend that to me. The interview asked him if he'd get rid of DACA, and he said, no, I want to make a deal with the Democrats to help these people. So there have been some changes in the way he's viewing things. I'd like to talk a little bit about the legal immigration system, and then, I'm happy to take questions. The People come in on all the temporary visas are alphabetical from A to V. And a lot of them permit people to work in the US. Probably the most talked about one is the H-1B visa. Mainly, it's for professionals, but it's mainly used by the IT companies to bring in temporary workers. Um, they in the 80s and 90s and stuff, it used to be there was no numerical limit, but then they established a limit of 85,000 people who could get the H-1B visas from certain employers. Um, and they get about 500,000 applicants. So the chances of Apple or Facebook or, you name it, some big company trying to get somebody from India or China or another country to come and get an H-1B visa are about 1 in 5. But under the Trump administration, it was even worse because they wanted to push up. You have to pay the people at whatever the Labor Department says is the prevailing wage in that location. And they wanted to push it up even higher. They also would look at people who were computer programmers and maybe had a bachelor or master's degree, and they would say, well, yeah, you have a master's degree, but it really doesn't take a college degree to become a computer programmer. So we're going to deny it. So there was a massive amount of denials and also requests for additional evidence. There are certain employers who are exempt from that, mainly universities and certain nonprofits, uh, but we don't have time to go into that right now. As far as green cards, uh, President Trump and his first administration supported a bill called the RAISE Act, RAISE, which would have cut legal immigration in half. That bill didn't even come close to a majority. It never went anywhere. But what they did, thanks to Stephen Miller and some of the advisors, is they came up with a very clever way, even though they couldn't change the law. They stopped hiring people for the Immigration Service and the State Department. So it took forever to get interviews. And even when you did get an interview, they would ask you for more and more evidence that they usually didn't. And it would just cut down the number of people who qualified for green cards every year. Um, Also, I want to talk about two other things before I open it up to questions. I'd like to talk about birthright citizenship because that's a very controversial thing. The 14th Amendment, which passed, amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which passed after the Civil War, said that people born and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States are automatically citizens at birth. Okay. But some of Trump's legal advisors have come up with these theories that, well, hey, if your parents are undocumented, even though you're born in the US, you shouldn't be considered as a citizen at birth. And at the Meet the Press interview, I watched it, and he said, we're the only country in the world that allows this. Google it. You'll see that every country except two in North and South America has the same law. You're born in Argentina, Mexico, Canada, you're an automatic citizen. It's not just the US. So there's 24 countries that have exactly what we have. There's also 70 something other countries that have it, but with restrictions. So they'll say, I'll just give you an example, but oh, you're born in France or, Germany or something. You're not automatically a citizen, but maybe you have one parent who is a citizen of that country, then you are automatically a citizen at birth. Um, if he attempts to restrict birthright citizenship, I think it'll be just like mass deportations. There'll be litigation all through the federal courts, all the way up to the US Supreme Court, which will take years to do that. Um, a lot of, I've noticed a lot of immigration lawyers on social media are already, I don't know, they're already losing sleep saying, oh, people that are US citizens by birth, but their parents are undocumented and they've been federal employees for 10 or 20 years will be fired. And, I, I don't think so, but that's just me. We'll see what happens with birthright citizenship. And then one last thing is denaturalization. So well, let's go way back. I mean, uh, Jenny talked about that, that I used to work for the Immigration Service back in the 70s and early 80s. And there was a stack of papers outside my office, which we call rap sheets, people who had criminal arrest or convictions. And nobody was ever matching those rap sheets with the person's file. So one day when I didn't have a lot of interviews, I picked up one of the rap sheets and it was a young guy who was charged with rape and theft, not convicted, but charged. And I went and I got his file, and he had said on his application for citizenship that he had never been arrested in his life, which was a lie. And he had just got naturalized the week before I read this. And so me and a friend of mine, we actually studied this, went to the federal court, got his, we didn't get him denaturalized. Well, I guess sort of denaturalized. We got the judge who had naturalized him to put him back in a pending naturalization application. And I worked with some process. I found the girl that was, he was charged with raping. And I went with another female attorney from immigration. I went and interviewed her in the evening, and she had been hitchhiking. She worked in Westwood at a restaurant, and she got dropped off at some place on Wilshire Boulevard in West Los Angeles. And he and his brother had picked her up. And for various reasons I won't go into, she thought they could be trusted. And they engaged in all these sexual fantasies with this poor girl, and he was charged with rape. Um, and the only reason they dropped charges against him is because at that time, a rape victim could be questioned on the stand about her whole sexual life. And the psychiatrist who interviewed her said, drop the conviction or drop the case against this guy, because if she has to do that, she's probably going to commit suicide. Um, but she told us all the facts of the case. And even though the rape was something that we couldn't bring against him anymore, we found out that he had done all these illegal things, not immigration, but criminal things. And we got a 10-count felony indictment against him. When he got arrested, he put up his yacht. He was very successful as collateral. And then he headed to LAX and has never come back to the United States. So all I'm telling you is there are people who should be denaturalized. And way before Trump became president, they found out that they hadn't matched fingerprint records to files, sort of like this guy's case, for hundreds of people. So, in my view, as an ex-prosecutor, yes, I think there are people that they should take away their citizenship if they lied on their application, like this guy did. Um, and but I have an article. If you look at denaturalization and Schusterman, look on my website and you'll see a case in the first Trump administration where, in my opinion, they just went way too far in trying to denaturalize people. So those are the 8 things that I think we have to look out for on January 20th and afterwards. And I'm happy to take questions that people have. Although, please know, I'm just predicting what's going to happen. I don't have, Stephen Miller and I don't have dinner together, so I don't know exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah, Carl, there's several questions. I can read them.
Okay.
Um, let's see. We're under asylum. At least the rule should be that if we don't pass our case, please can we only visit to other countries too for kids' vocation? At least this thing should be allowed. We are requesting. We submitted our brief and are waiting for decision. Feel a lot of stress.
Yeah, I tell, theoretically, if you have a very good reason for, I mean, of course, you can't visit the country where you're claiming you would be persecuted, but if you're from Ukraine and you wanted to take a vacation to Cabo San Lucas in Mexico, uh, you have to apply to get something called an advance parole, which is an international travel permit from immigration. But given what's going to go on with the new administration, I think you better take that vacation now. I would advise people with pending asylum applications not to travel out of the US after January 20th.
Okay. Here's another one. Do you have predictions on the impact on the diversity visa lottery? If one has won in the current DV lottery, but one's case number is not yet current, can he stop the ongoing DV lottery or slow it down?
Yeah, so the lottery picks 55,000 people a year out of millions of people who apply. Uh, Frankly, and no, I don't mean anything bad for you, but I personally don't think it's the best way to pick people to come to the United States. I think, you know, countries like Canada have a point system where, you know, you get points for your relatives, your education, uh, your employment, and so on. So, but the RAISE Act that Trump supported would have gotten rid of the visa lottery. But as I said, the RAISE Act, I think, only got about 39 votes, nowhere near a majority. So Trump is not going to be, in my opinion, not going to be able to get rid of the diversity lottery. And certainly for somebody who's already been picked in the diversity lottery, you should be okay.
Okay, here's another one. Do you expect any changes in the 601A unlawful presence waiver?
Okay, so let me explain what that is. Okay, and that's a good subject because I kind of skipped that, but it's really important. If if you came illegally into the United States and maybe you've been here for years, and then you marry a citizen and you pay your taxes and you have kids here and you're a good person, how do you legalize yourself in the US? Well, in the 1990s, Congress passed a law and it said that if you were in the US for over a year unlawfully, you were subject to what they call a 10-year unlawful presence bar if you go out of the country. And people who come illegally into the US, as opposed to somebody who comes on a visitor's visa and then never leaves and overstays, the people coming on visitors visa, if they marry a US citizen, they can get their green card without leaving the US, even though they have a lot of unlawful presence. People who came illegally across the border, they have to go back to their country to be able to get green cards through their spouse. So what again, Congress hasn't passed any significant immigration legislation in about 30 years now. So what Obama did to try to overcome that, and it was only partially successful, he oh, okay, before I say that, you had to submit an unlawful presence waiver. And to get the waiver, in other words, you wouldn't be subject to the 10-year bar. You could go to the US Embassy in your country, have your interview, and if you're not a criminal or a terrorist or anything bad, then you can come back to the US with a green card. But people were afraid, to do that because number one, they had to wait until they went to Mexico City or Guatemala or wherever it was in the world that they came from. And it might take a year for them to get that waiver. And the form that you fill out to get a waiver is called an I-601. And you had to show that either your parents, who are citizens or green card holders, or your spouse, who's a citizen or green card holder, would suffer extreme hardship if they didn't let you back for 10 years. And most of the people didn't have citizen parents. The people, obviously, they did have citizen spouses. I always advise people that if they didn't have children together that are born here, don't even try it because they wouldn't get that waiver. Uh, but people were very nervous to do that anyway. So in 2012, Obama, by executive order, he started something new called the I-601A. So you could apply for the waiver before you left the US and the government could grant it. They call it a provisional waiver. So theoretically, it could be overturned, but that would be very unusual. And then you could go back to your country. So thousands of people did that. uh, Biden tried to take it a step further because, a lot of people who came to the US years ago and married to citizens and had families and stuff, they just didn't do the I-601A waiver. So a few months ago, he put in an executive order for something called parole in place. They've done that for military spouses for years. So if you come illegally and you marry somebody in the military, you can get your green card without leaving the US. So we did the same thing for people who had been here for at least 10 years, married to US citizen, and no bad record, no criminal convictions and things. But it got challenged immediately in court. And about 3 weeks ago, it was overturned in the courts. They estimated that 500,000 spouses of US citizens would have qualified. So that means over 500,000 spouses have been here over 10 years. And the other estimate is that there's 1.5 million undocumented people who are married to U.S. citizens. They haven't, 1 million of them haven't been here for 10 years, so they wouldn't have qualified. Um, but would Trump get rid of the I-601A waiver? Very possibly. But, I know immigration is not, it's my focus. It's not his only focus, but the people like Stephen Miller and other people are just looking for ways to be able to deport a lot of people if in the mass deportations they go way beyond violent criminals and start deporting spouses of U.S. citizens who have kids here. I I hope that there'll be a backlash in public opinion and people will say, no, you shouldn't separate families like that.
Carl, we've got a lot of questions and we still have stuff to do, but there's one here that I think is coming. The one here, basically, I think you've answered it sort of in a roundabout way. Is there any way for a person who has overstayed their I-94 to apply for status without leaving the country?
If
There
they
is, depending on what you just, yeah, yeah.
well, I won't say only, but 99%, they either have to marry a citizen or have kids that are citizens and are over 21, and then they qualify as an immediate relative. And the fact that they're here undocumented, I mean, they have to come here legally, but if they overstay, that's not counted against immediate relatives.
Yeah. And here's a question I was going to ask because I thought I heard rumors about this. Do you expect the current F4 category of family immigration will be abolished under Trump? I mean, they've talked about doing this for years.
Okay.
Everybody,
So, I mean, I don't disagree. I probably disagree with President Trump on many, on most immigration things. But uh, I tell you, I think our immigration system should reward people who have special skills that come to the U.S. I mean, if you look, uh, Steve Jobs was the son of a Syrian immigrant to the U.S. That's how Apple got founded. Sergey Brin was somebody who came from Russia. I mean, you look at all the big companies and things, and you see an overwhelming amount of immigrants, very talented people. So I think if he could reach some kind of agreement with the Democrats, which I'm skeptical about, get rid of the visa lottery, get rid of the brother sister category, and replace that with uh, more talented people, I think that would be good. But on the other hand, remember that there are people that have been waiting in line in the brother sister category for 20 years. And I think it would be very unfair to take those people who've done everything the right way and kick them out of line. So I think for me, if I were in the Congress, I would say there has to be exceptions for people currently in line, but we would be willing to give up the brother sister category and the visa lottery category if you would add those numbers to the employment categories.
yeah. Okay, here's one that really is your area of expertise, I think. How do you expect the EB3 visa process for qualified nurses to change during the Trump administration?
Well, this is where the partisan things, I've always been sort of a liberal Democrat, right? But I when I testified, and my testimony is actually online on YouTube, um, the nurses, well, okay, the nurses could get they called it the H-1 visa back in the 70s and the 80s and so on. And then they split it in two in the 1990s. And they said all these professionals could get H-1B visas and nurses could get H-1A visas. But for the nurses, they could only get, it was only a 5-year thing. And Congress let that expire. So most nurses cannot get temporary visas, even though we have a shortage of nurses that probably by 2030 will be over 1 million. It'll be terrible for healthcare in the US. And it's not the MAGA Republicans that did that. I mean, Brownback, who I worked with, he was a very conservative Republican. That was actually the Democrats. It was the unions. And if you look at my testimony, the woman sitting next to me was a union member, and she kept saying, we need better ratios of nurses to patients, 1 to 4. And I totally agreed with that. But she didn't want any foreign nurses to come in. And yet the nursing schools in the US, and for a few years, my alma mater, UCLA, closed their nursing program. So, sometimes it's the unions who tend to be anti-immigrant, and I think that's the case with the doctors and the nurses. Yeah.
There's quite a few more questions, but they're more personal in nature, to specific, details. So Carl, do you still have consults or free consults that you do on occasion, or?
Yeah, so I only do 4 a week, but I work with 2 other lawyers who don't have that limitation. So if you go to my website, which is my last name, schusterman.com, and look in the upper right-hand corner, it says schedule consultation, and you click on that, fill out the form online, attach documents, and select the date that you want your consultation.
Okay. Well, for those of you we did not get to your questions, please follow Carl's advice if you do want to get some more details about your particular circumstances. But the time was pressing on, and we have to get to the second part of our program. And I am going to turn it over to our second vice president, Soraya. Fallah.
Yes, sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Let me admit this one. Welcome again. Today on Human Rights Day, as part of our program, we will hear from a highly motivated and resourceful student who has exemplified values of equal opportunity in immigration through her work to support undocumented individuals in the San Fernando Valley. She has taken the initiative to organize a group of her peers to help immigrants leads about pathway to citizenship. Before I pass the floor to her, let me introduce her. Stephanie Day is a high school senior at Granada Hills Charter High School and the child of Vietnamese immigrant. Her upbringing has given her invaluable experiences in transition and citizenship services. During her junior year, recognizing the lack of personalized support for immigrants in the San Fernando Valley, Stephanie co-founded Creating Legal Immigration Pathway to provide tailored assistance for immigrants navigating the journey to citizenship. This is amazing. So we're very excited to invite her. So the entire group, basically, from translating materials into multiple languages to developing a curriculum that guides migrants through the naturalization process. Stephanie has worked tirelessly over the past years to make immigration more accessible and equitable. That's what we want. As we celebrate Human Rights Day, let us be inspired by the impactful work of young leaders like Stephanie, who are paving the ways. for a more inclusive and compassionate society. Stephanie and Clive reminded that the rights to dignity, equality, and opportunity should belong to everyone, regardless of where they come from or their immigration status. Welcome, Stephanie. I let her share her inspiring story with us. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soraya, for that introduction, and I will just go ahead and get right into it. So that was a great introduction, and that pretty much summarizes who I am and what I'm doing here. And I'm going to go ahead and open up a Google Slides presentation that I have prepared for you guys. All right, think that should be working. So this is me. As Dr. Soraya said, I am currently a high school senior at Granada Hills Charter High School, and I co-founded Creating Legal Immigration Pathways just last year with Ayushi Garg. As a child of immigrants, this is just something that I've been kind of surrounded by my entire life, something that everyone in this call is incredibly familiar with, considering the amount of questions we had, because it's a very complicated process, and we realized that we really just want to help people get through it, because watching our parents navigate paperwork and watching our relatives navigate it is kind of exactly what motivated us to start trying to do something about it. So, what is CLIP? We are a student organization that's dedicated to providing immigrants with free resources and individualized support to streamline their pathways to citizenship. Los Angeles is an incredibly diverse place, and the San Fernando Valley alone, 30, I believe it's 33% of people are migrants, meaning they weren't born in America. Immigrants are an incredibly important part to not only our economies, but our societies, as Carl mentioned. So it's something that we found very important to try and kind of address a gap in the resources we saw in the world around us. So, just to talk a little bit about our organization's history, it was just founded last year because we had an interest in serving the expansive immigrant community here in the San Fernando Valley. And each year we get funding from the Bezos Scholar Foundation, and with a couple other grant applications, we've had enough money to host events, get team T-shirts, do all the little things that make our organization just a little bit more stable in modern society. So, I've talked a little bit about like what exactly CLIP is in general and kind of how it got started. But right now, we have a team of almost a dozen young students who are hoping to make an impact in their community for too many important reasons. So, like I mentioned, my parents are Vietnamese immigrants, and I've witnessed firsthand how difficult it is to navigate paperwork and handle things like getting a job, sending your kids to school, working through a million other tiny things that make navigating paperwork just incredibly troublesome. So some of our team members, like June, who comes from an immigrant family, has had to help her family handle paperwork from car insurance, legal documents, regular insurance, and it's just and she's noticed how difficult it is to kind of be in America when you only have a green card and you're not allowed to leave for more than 6 months, showing just how much not being a citizen can really limit somebody's quality of life. With Rose, she's noticed one of our team members who's just joined this year. She's noticed that her parents have faced discrimination and racism from the immigration system simply because of their previous nationalities, showing how difficult it is to navigate a system that is unwelcoming and unwilling to bend to migrants. And these are just a few of the examples of our incredibly diverse team and the different ways that the immigration system has impacted our families. So, now that you kind of have a little bit of context about what our team is and why we are so passionate about what we do, what exactly do we do? Some things that we actually do are providing translation services for documentation. So, as of right now, there are the N400 questions online, etc., etc. But what we noticed is that there's a distinct lack of translated materials in languages like Vietnamese, Farsi, Korean, Armenian, in things like flashcards for the more casual interview portion of the exam. So, these resources are available on our website, and we're currently always trying to work on creating new ones so people have access to the resources that they learn best from, whether that be visual flashcards or through audio resources. And we are always updating these year by year. So if you happen to speak some of our target languages, which are Vietnamese, Armenian, Spanish, Korean, or Farsi, please head on over to our website if you are in need of any of these resources, and they are provided there incredibly accessibly and for free. Secondly, is we try and host an annual legal aid fair. Now, although CLIP was only founded last year, we hosted a legal aid fair on site at the Congregational Church of Chatsworth, which some of you might actually attend as regular churchgoers. So it's a very accessible location, and we gathered 10 organizations from across Los Angeles. So that was the Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles. This was the City Clerk Office, etc. These were all groups who are hoping to make immigration a little bit more of an accessible pathway for the average person. And now, some actions that we're actually doing currently are hosting in-person citizenship clinics at the Congregational Church of Chatsworth, Thursdays and Saturdays, just from 6 to 8 p.m. And I noticed that a lot of you had questions in the chat about specific cases with asylum, seeking vacation, the changes that this administration is going to bring. And while you're obviously able to field that to Mr. Carl right over there, we host these clinics every single week in an effort to kind of make this more accessible for people here in the Valley who might not have access to a lawyer. So while we're not legal experts and we can't provide legal counsel, we can help kind of clear the brush a little bit so you can visualize your pathway to citizenship a little clearer. And as I previously mentioned, we do have partner organizations that we've worked with in the past who we are able to provide referral to, who we're able to kind of streamline a path to. And this is all possible by attending our in-person citizenship clinics, which are entirely free and offered pretty much every Thursday and Saturday. So that's just kind of one of the few. These are just kind of the few of the ways that we've wanted to try and address immigration equity in the Valley, and some of the ways that we've been trying to get on the ground and actually take action for the issues that we've been noticing in the world around us. And
Thank you, Jenny.
and something that we wanted to talk about, well, I also wanted to touch on, is the fact that we're here speaking on Human Rights Day. And as many of you are incredibly aware of, human rights are kind of intrinsically tied to an immigrant's ability to belong. So if you want to receive resources such as like food stamps, I can't name them off the top of my head, but these resources are kind of only accessible to citizens or people who have their citizenship, people who have their documentation. And we believe that it's essential that immigrants have these rights to access these things, such as free movement, education, social services, because average US citizens often take this right for granted. And those who need it most, like migrants who are trying to build their lives in the Valley, often don't have access to these resources. And we think it's incredibly important that on Human Rights Day, we recognize the importance of having citizenship to obtain your deserved human rights. And we believe that naturalization starts the process of receiving these rights, which is why we advocate and why we're trying to fight on a day-by-day basis to make naturalization more accessible. And then finally, we think CLIP is kind of incredibly important as an organization to me because it takes a lot of the cultural linguistic barriers away from the immigration process. So by translating things like interview preparation materials or working one-on-one with migrants who speak to us in their native language, we're able to chip away at an impenetrable language barrier that often motivates people to stay away from that process. Like I know my mom, she speaks Vietnamese fluently and can speak English pretty well. But when it comes to legal jargon and navigating the N400 or something like that, it's really easy for her and for other migrants to be turned away because this language is confusing. As a native English speaker, I can't even lie. I get confused sometimes. So if you're raised somewhere for 30 years and you're coming to this country to try and understand a whole new language and a whole new legal system, it's a lot to go through. So what we do is we want to make this access to resources more culturally aware so people have more success. We want to have these clinics so we can provide personalized assistance on a level that goes beyond a digital website or an occasional referral. And then we want to eventually help people actually achieve their citizenship in terms that they understand so that they can be protected by a federal authority. And it's important that we have, I think that our organization as CLIP is incredibly important because it uplifts student volunteers who are local to the Valley. Our entire team of volunteers goes to Granada Hills Charter High School, and it allows us to host these clinics and lead these translation efforts in order to kind of uplift these youth to have a greater say in the world around them. It's really easy to feel overwhelmed, especially in a time right now when politics are changing and a lot is going to be happening in the upcoming year. So that's why I think CLIP is really important because it's empowered youth leaders, not only me, but my incredible team members, many of which are in the crowd here tonight. So to kind of take charge of their own lives and actually make an impact for their community. So, going forward, Clip is going to be continuing to translate materials. Right now, we have flyers that have been translated into different languages, so we can better reach out to different communities who speak different languages. And we're gonna keep hosting our citizenship clinics to help anybody who wants help getting their paperwork, their citizenship, etc., etc. If you guys have heard this presentation and you're really interested in supporting our work, I welcome that with open arms. Please collaborate with us at our future clinics or future events. And collaboration can mean something such as coming into the clinics to volunteer, speaking with attendees, or even inviting us to table at events that you host, such as farmers markets, local events, or coming to our future events if we host another legal aid fair in this upcoming year. But most importantly than this, I believe, is to spread the word of our clinics. We can only create so much energy in this space, but it's a lot harder to find people who want to take in that energy. So the biggest way that you could help us is by letting immigrants in your life know that this resource is out there and they can get help entirely for free every Thursday and Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Congregational Church of Chatsworth. Right here is some of our contact information if you're interested in either reaching out to us, hearing a little bit more, or just looking into our resources for yourself. We can be found on Instagram and Facebook at Clip Citizenship, which I highly encourage you to take a look at because that's where we post all our updates, whether it's details about clinics or whether it's details about events that we're going to be hosting. That's going to be the place where you'll find the most up-to-date information about what we do and what kind of impact we're making in the Valley. And if you have any personal inquiries, whether that's about how we can help you, or if that's about if your pathway to citizenship is looking good or not, shoot us an email at clipcitizenship@gmail.com or check out our website and reach and find our contact page because we want to speak to you guys and we want to make sure that you're we want to make sure that you're getting the help that you deserve. So that summarizes pretty much my presentation for the night. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It was very concise and very right to the point. We really appreciate that. I did not expect less than that because when I see a group of young people, they're so motivated and they do such a good job. I certainly, for my work, I certainly introduce you. And usually for any event, we have a call for action. So you already did the call for action. We support you and we ask our attendees to support your organization and your amazing work as well. I don't I don't see any question.
Tiffany, I have a suggestion. You should put a QR code on your document so that people can just easily get to you. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good suggestion.
Noted. While that wasn't on our English copy, we realized that and we added it after to our Korean, Farsi, and Spanish copies.
Good.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. And so I think I can unmute you all so you can, if you have any question, please go ahead and ask any question you have for both our speaker. Thank you also, Carl, for all the information. I actually have a question for Carl, but I will wait for everyone if they have a question. So,
Oh,
yes. So
there's
you
something
can
in the chat.
ask.
Check on the chat, Stephanie.
Okay. All right. So you can ask questions. So you all have you can unmute yourself and ask question if you have any questions. No? So I have a question for Carl, actually. May I?
Sure.
Carl?
Yes, go ahead, go right
Okay.
ahead.
All right. I listened to your presentation. They were very good, very informative. One point that I had the question was in the end when you said what you as a suggestion or not suggestion, you said I am not agree with many of the Trump's policy that he might or might not implement, but with the one that, but I think instead of allowing everyone to come or changing those stuff about immigration, people with highly skilled or genius, basically, we can gather them to the United States. We allow them, only allow those people, not other people. I think this is, for in my opinion, we don't know who is who till they come, right? There is the issue of equity in another country. If we don't have the same opportunity in another country, and when they come to United States, they have this opportunity, they become Steve Jobs or other people that you also. I know Steve Jobs was not born outside of the country, but who knew if his parents wouldn't come that time, we wouldn't have Steve Jobs, right? My point is that we cannot decide about like pick and choose and say, okay, my door is only open for these kind of people. Then disability rights come as an issue because people with disability, they don't have the same skill, so they cannot come, and it's against human rights. And maybe women who did not get a chance to be educated in Afghanistan or Iran or some other countries, how they can come to this country if only skilled people or people with like basically those people that they must be able to come. What do you think about this?
Well, okay, so our immigration system, a lot of people don't know about this. There was a book I read called The Nation of Nations, and in 1965, they were talking, it was during the Civil Rights Revolution, and they were talking about reforming the very restrictive laws that they put in place in the 1920s. In the 1920s, the eugenics was, there was a mass. People think Hitler invented that, but he actually got it from us, that there was a higher race, and it was people from Northern and Western Europe who were the people of the higher race. And in the US, it was pretty much closed to people from Asia, people from Africa and so on. But even in Europe, where most of the immigrants came from the 1880s to the 1920s, uh, they thought, well, we don't really need those people from Southern Europe, from Italy and Spain, and they're Catholics or Greek Orthodox, and they're not the best people. And the other people we don't need are all those Jews from Eastern Europe, okay? So in the 1920s, they pretty much closed 90% of the immigration from those two sections of Europe down. Probably millions of people got killed in the Holocaust who would have immigrated to the United States. So finally, the 1960s happened, and they were going to reform the immigration laws. And there was a senator and a Senator Hart from Michigan and a congressman from New York, and they proposed this bill, and it would be like half family and half employment, half skills and half family members. And Lyndon Johnson, he was very upset because the bill wasn't going through Congress. And he was calling people like, what's going on with this bill? We passed the Civil Rights Bill. Why can't we pass an immigration bill? And there was a senator from Ohio who was holding it up in committee. And Johnson said, hey, I want to get, he called the guy, I want to get your input. I'm going to fly out with Air Force One and you can tell me what you want. And he talked to this congressman, and the congressman told him, look, America, at least at that time, was about 90% white and about 10% black. And he said, the black people, they don't know their relatives because they were brought over as slaves. Only the white people would know their relatives. So what I want is an immigration system that is family-based. You can apply for your brothers, your sisters, your married kids that are 50 years old, whatever. And a very small group would come under employment. And that's the immigration, even though they touted it as opening up the doors of America again, it was a very restrictive law. And when I look at other countries like, Canada, for instance, but a lot of the European countries, and uh, they have a more skills-based criteria. So my wife is an immigrant from the Philippines, and she's got 8 brothers and sisters. And I always say to her, I said, half of your family, you have a sister who's a doctor and a brother who's an accountant, and they can bring lots of good skills. But some of your brothers and sisters are not the kind of people that I would want in the US. Um, so that's why I have always shifted to think if the system should be more based on skills and less based on family ties. So, I mean, I don't have a vote in Congress, but that's just my personal opinion about this.
But that's what I explained, that I'm not agree. It doesn't mean that you should agree with what I think or I should agree, but I don't think this is issue and matter of equity in my mind. And also this is gonna bring, in my opinion, it brings some um uh human rights issue about disability or people with disability in another country, if they have some people here, or they want to come to this country, or they have a dream about changing their life here, or they did not have a right for education, and those that I explained. So the matter of pick and choose is always issue for in my mind. Thank you so much for explaining
Sure.
your ideas. So, and anything here? Do you read any question, Ginny?
I just have a comment that to me, the immigration law needs to be revised. For so long, and it seems to me it's not that difficult to do. I kind of agree with what Carl is saying and what others say. If you eliminate the fourth preference categories of brothers and sisters, and basically then you increase on the non-immigrant side the number of workers that can come here, especially the farm workers, the agricultural workers, you would reduce a lot of the undocumented that are currently here, because these people are coming to work. And basically, I think, and many of them in the past, now maybe not so much, but their families were staying in, say, Mexico, and the parent or the father was coming here to work, and it was separating, and they were coming back and forth illegally. Maybe now it's much tougher to do, but if you increase those numbers, those people would work half a year and they'd go back and they live probably pretty well in their home country, and it would serve our purposes, the country, the agricultural interest here, which is an economic boon. And it would help them as well. I mean, that's one of the ways I think they should really do it. Get rid of the diversity lottery too. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, anyway. And
I,
I kind of agree on the idea. I think there should be family preferences for sure. And you should honor those who are in the waiting list now should be honored. If they've been approved, they should at least get their hearing to see if they qualify totally and if they get a visa. But when you do come with a new immigration law, you set a deadline. Anybody who applied, before this date, you're in the system and you will be adjudicated. Everybody else, that's it. We're no longer doing this. So you make it so that at least they get their shot at it. So anyway.
yeah,
So, yeah,
unfortunately, I have to leave, but I agree with you. And I think if I were going to say it in one sentence, I would say, the economy and the immigration laws need to align more.
Right.
So, the people that are picking the crops.
Right.
I walked through sometimes Bel Air and these fancy parts of LA, and the guys that are constructing these houses that probably go for $100 million, they're all speaking Spanish. And I go to the Persian restaurants on Westwood Boulevard, and I go into the kitchen and talk to the people. The cooks are not Persian. They're from Mexico and Central America. So there should be a legal way. But that's just me. But thank you for inviting me. Okay.
Yeah.
sure. And we have David wants to talk, and also I want to hear Stephanie about this matter. What do you think, Stephanie?
Yes, thank you, Soraya. We have another participant, one of our board members who wants to ask a question, and that is Maureen Lerner. Maureen, what is your question?
Okay, oh God. My question is like a lot of these actions for the immigration thing are boasting about the 14th Amendment. I don't know how that works because I was under the impression that this because you're born in this country doesn't make you an automatic citizen 1, 2, 3. And using that 14th Amendment, which was actually done after the Civil War to take care of the former slaves. That's what that was established for. It wasn't for actual immigration status or anything like that. So I don't know how this 14th Amendment, how it's going to work now, because it wasn't designed as an immigration tool. I don't remember what year it was. Maybe in 1865. I'm presuming that amendment was.
I think Carl had mentioned that there was another act that was passed after the Civil War that granted citizenship to people born in the U.S. once you were born in the U.S. And that then there was the 14th Amendment. I didn't think it was one and the same he mentioned. Anyway, maybe I got it wrong, but that's what I thought. I think, Joanna, you had a question?
Hi. No, it's okay. My question was answered. Thank you, though.
Okay. And
Okay, go
Chartrice,
ahead.
is it? Yeah.
Yes, Shatrice, hi, how are you? I did have a question, it was basically I wanted to know what anybody's thoughts were, or Mr. Schulman, but he had to leave. Carl had to leave about all of the immigration cases that have been dismissed in immigration court. So I am an immigration practitioner. 11 years as a trial attorney before I went out on my own. But there have been thousands of cases under the Biden administration that have been dismissed in immigration court. Mainly people who've been here for some time, but they, did not have strong enough asylum cases, but they had families, they have equities. And there's a huge concern about whether or not these thousands of cases that the government has already agreed to dismiss their cases out of immigration removal proceedings, will they all be put back in proceedings? And I just wanted to know maybe what some of you thought, as well as the special immigrant juvenile status program, which under the last Trump administration, they tried to undermine everything that was done in family court or domestic relations court for these kids. And again, these are the most vulnerable. Kids have been abused, neglected, and who have, made it here to the United States. And it's a big concern about whether those programs will be whether that will be dismantled or what they would do. And I just wanted to know what maybe some of your thoughts were.
Well, I'm no immigration attorney, and I would just say there's that door is always open. And I think, he's got 4 years, okay, and he's going to start with the criminals and then work his way down. I think he'll take the easiest means first. So the stuff with the court, I don't know how easy that would be to undo some of that, but I think they'll go for the least restrictive means of deporting people first, and then they'll get down to the more difficult ones because that's the PR for it, right? You can show the numbers to the people that elected you. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I actually have another question that I just thought of, and I was wondering if it's okay if I ask it.
Yeah, sure.
Joanna, go ahead.
Well, my mom is Iranian and she got her education in Iran. And when she was immigrating here, I heard some talk about like preferences on who to like accept their citizenship and who not to. And I wanted to ask because both my parents, obviously they're from Iran, but they were educated priorly. I wanted to see if they got any kind of like treatment that maybe other immigrants aren't getting because of their lack of education.
I don't think so. I mean, from my, I used to do as more or less an avocation, citizenship and permanent residency, because I had a background in that. I worked for a member of Congress for over 20 years. And, when you work in a local office of the member, it's all the constituent concerns that you deal with. And over 50% of people who are contacting our office were all related to the old INS system, the Immigration and Naturalization Service. Now it's called USCIS. And it was a whole different ballgame trying to deal with those people at that time and trying to get answers from them. There was always a 3-year backlog on people who applied for citizenship in order to get to the point where you'd actually be interviewed. It's waned back and forth over the decades. Now I think it's probably within a year or so. I don't know. I haven't looked at the process reports lately, but there shouldn't be, I don't think, any difference. And if you've been here for such a long time for citizenship and you're over a certain age, 50 and then 65, you can there's less questions and you can take the questions in your native language for the citizenship test. So,
Well,
there
is a different I don't know what kind of good treatment that they got or bad or whatever, but there is a difference when everywhere when you can advocate for yourself or not. If you're educated, you advocate for yourself, you ask for your right, so that part that I wasn't agree, and I said, I told Carl was that kind of like pick and choose one. So if a person is not educated, that person wants to come here and legally enter this country should get the same right and the same treatment as when I came as a person with master's degree. That's the thing. But I'm sure because they could maybe speak English or they knew how to defend their rights, so they could advocate for themselves. The treatment was different. I'm directly working with immigrants and with refugees, and I see that there is a difference. So it's not like based on law, and in the law said if you are educated or you are able body and stuff, so I treat you differently. It's not reading, but it's usually in common practice.
Thank you so much for that
So
clarification.
it was very, very good question, Joanna. Thank you. Okay, I think we come to the end, and if
I have a
David
question.
wants to wrap it up. Oh, go ahead, please. I haven't seen any hand.
I'm an
Go ahead.
existing green card holder. Is there any jeopardy that you see?
For green card holders,
Yes.
I would sincerely hope not. I mean, you're on a path. I don't see where you're not undocumented. You are. So I think you're okay. That's my opinion.
You're not hearing
And
any
as I said,
backlash.
they're going to go for the administration's going to go for the easy deportations first. They're
Right.
not
Right.
get involved, I think, in as much as they can, with all the legal stuff. So they're looking for the numbers so that they can put out the press releases showing what they're doing and that
Right.
they're
So,
meeting their goals. So I
so
don't think you should
you
worry.
don't see any problems with because I'm coming up for renewal in 2026, and all of his rhetoric has got me a little concerned.
Yeah, I mean, just abide by the law that's in there now.
Hi, Jenny. I'm going to
Yeah.
also answer your question, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you are a LP or legal permanent resident, as long as you haven't committed any, it's defined as a crime of moral turpitude, any major or high crimes, especially those that are felonies, that would call into question an individual being able to retain being an LPR. So as long as you are you follow the law and as a LPR, there shouldn't be any issues in terms of retaining that when it comes up for renewal in 2026.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, AJ, you heard that from an official officer. So David is working as an officer in immigration services. So you heard it from him.
Thank you.
And I just want to
Any
quickly
other-
add, I do have to plug. Obviously, I agree with the sentiment that you should be fine as a green card holder. That is like legal status. However, if you are interested in finalizing that with your citizenship, free student organization, we want to help as many people as possible, and we are here. We're in Chatsworth. So if you're interested in taking your green card and seeing if there's a pathway to get your full naturalization paperwork, let us know. Clip citizenship. Yay!
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard you before.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, my question is about a non-immigrant question that's called about E2 visa. That's a trustee investor, basically treaty investor visa. Can you hear me, guys?
I'm not qualified to deal with the employment visas. No, that would be one unless David knows something that I don't. But
Maybe David is be able, or Mr. Shusterman, again, he's gone. So we are facing so many questions about E2 visas. E2 visa is treaty investor visas, specifically in the Asian side, that's India, Pakistan, or subcontinent, and people really want to invest here. That's a very limited investment. I'm not talking about the EB5 visa. That's a treaty investor visa, a very substantial amount that people really wants to invest in United States, like a $200,000 or $500,000 and get the work permit. But before the investment, they really wants to get the business visa to check the market. But unfortunately, in the subcontinent, I'm observing the practice is there. Whenever they file business visa, B1 or B2 visa,
The event on creating legal immigrant pathways with our eminent speaker on immigration, Carl Schusterman, and with our co-founder of CLIP, Stephanie Din. I would encourage you, if you're interested in more how you can become a citizen through their legal clinics, check out CLIP again at clipcitizenship.org. I would also encourage you all to join our Fernando Valley Chapter and become a member, where you can also advocate and get more involved and learn about important programs and presentations every single month. So go to unausa.org under membership, select San Fernando Valley Chapter. And with that, on behalf of the chapter and the board, we thank you all for attending today and look forward to seeing you all again in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.